One topic that I always find really interesting in music discussions and really engaging, and I think other people do as well, is the idea of a three-peats, a 3-album run in music history that is just so untouchable, so unbelievably strong, no misses at all, 3 exceptionally good pieces of work from one artist consecutively in a row. And it boggles the mind of how an artist can really achieve such a thing. So I was thinking about it just over the last few days and decided to put together my own list of 3-peats in music that I personally think that are really bloody good. This conversation could go on forever, really. I've seen videos in the past from other content creators as well, and there's so many albums and so many artists that you could discuss and include in a conversation like this that it probably could make for multiple videos down the line. But for this first video that I want to do, whether I will do more, I don't know yet. But for this particular video, I'm just going to focus on 10 3-peat runs, 3 album runs that I think are exceptionally good in the world of music. And I'm sure you'll be screaming at your phone, at your computer, at your laptop, at your TV. Do people watch me on their TV? That would be pretty sick. I hope people watch me on their TV. That's kind of cool. That's pretty cool. And you might be thinking, why have you not included this? Well, tell me in the comments. Please let me know what you think is a run that is exceptionally good, worth your time, that I should have included. But you know me, I'll include ones that you weren't expecting. I'll include ones that you weren't thinking about. And hopefully you are put onto some new artists or new albums with this video, because that is all I hope to ever do with this channel, really. That is what my aim is. No particular order here, I'm just going to run down my list, starting with Adrianne Lenker. That run of Hours Were the Birds all the way through to her most recent solo album, Songs, is so good. She actually has an album from the 2000s that is way different to anything that she's done later in her career, which I find quite odd that she was even a part of that album, really. But I'm not including that, of course. It's the 3 albums from the 2010s right through to Songs that I just am blown away by, because not only are these albums exceptionally good in their own right, you could even have a separate conversation about a 3-peat within Big Thief's music, you know, their album runs that they've had. But her solo work I wanted to include in this video because I find that remarkably strong, really. Hours Were the Birds has a really soft, delicate feel to it, but also has an anthemic feel to it. Like, I really feel like you are made to sing along to every word that she's singing on that album. Of course, Hibiscus is a bit of a moodier tone, but also has a really interesting soundscape to it as well. Really locks you in that album. And then, of course, Songs, which is her most recent one, which probably is the most talked about and beloved album just through the success of her Big Thief work as well. Again, it is really delicate, really stripped back, really beautiful in its style and tone. Kind of has like an Ichiko Aoba feel to it, which honestly she could have been included in this video as well with her own runs of music. But yeah, love that run of albums. I kind of wrote Adrianne and Big Thief off initially with my first few exposures to their music, but over time I've proven myself completely wrong with how good she is, and this run is a stunner. So maybe not one you were thinking of immediately, but yeah, this came to mind so quickly for me when I thought about this idea of a 3-peat run. Definitely one you had in mind though, Stevie Wonder. Right from Innovisions through to Songs in the Key of Life. And what I love about this run of albums is how it ends on the most epic album of all. Of course, he carried on making music, and great music after that album, obviously. But I just think the fact that it does end on the double album, the huge mammoth behemoth of Songs in the Key of Life, the celebration of music that album is, the absolute joy of music in music history that just makes you feel so good and relaxed every time you put it on. It just feels so right that it ends with this one. But I've got to say, I've talked about Innovisions on this channel before in a separate video and talked about how much I love that one. But I do want to throw a little bit of love onto the middle album here as well, because I've got to say, this album, man, is so overlooked in his catalogue, perhaps because we are talking of an exceptionally good artist that you don't really come across very often in Stevie Wonder, a discography that is so strong that maybe it just kind of falls by the wayside a little bit. But Jesus Christ, man, this is such a good album. Please Don't Go is a great track. I think the soulful feel to this album is overlooked in the world of music. And yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's a recognisable album. It's Stevie Wonder. It's not like it's underrated or undiscovered or anything like that, or an absolute, obscure release. But just in the fact that it is kind of piled up with all these other great albums that he's put out there, I do think it's gone a bit underloved, I would say. So yeah, what a run of albums. Innovision starting it off, an exceptional album, even from the political angles that the album goes for as well, is really untouchable. Like, seriously, lots of political music out there over the years, but I think Stevie was one of the best when it came to just being so direct and straight to the point. Yeah, what a run of albums this is. I could talk about Stevie all day. Coming back to the modern day though, and also a folk artist again, like similar to Adrianne Lenker, we've got to talk about one of the GOATs, Fleet Foxes. Fleet Foxes, man, what a run this first leg of albums is. I mean, the debut being the best for me out of these three for sure, but the second album and the third album actually I think has some excellent moments on it as well. One of the more ambitious releases for their catalogue, I think, that third album, Crack Up. I think there's some really cool ideas going on there, the elongated tracks as well. I think they were really pushing their boundaries on that one, but the first two albums just being absolutely stunning folk releases, and honestly super influential. Like, you do not get some of those indie folk hits at the start of the 2010s without Fleet Foxes. Like, I don't even think you get Mumford & Sons' success without Fleet Foxes, actually. I really don't. I think they have had a really undercover influence on a lot of artists. And yeah, that kind of era where we just started seeing folky tunes get super big, I think wouldn't have happened without Robin's approach to vocals, the band's approach to harmony, melodies. Yeah, I really don't. I think that is something that goes way overlooked when talking about the history of the 2010s in music. Obviously, it wasn't a particularly long period in mainstream music, but yeah, I think Fleet Foxes were absolutely the reason for that for sure. And this is a great run of music. I just always found the beauty in their music just so touching. It's so hard not to listen to this and feel at least something. Like, you have to feel at least something listening to these guys, man. And I adore this band, and I think this run is wonderful. Kae Tempest next. Wow, the run from the first album right through to the Book of Traps and Lessons, I think is remarkable and so underrated. Ridiculously underrated. Let Them Eat Chaos. The writing on that album is absolutely stellar. What is packed into the song Europe is Lost blows me away every single time. So much detail in the writing from Kae on this album, and that track in particular. But good lord, just a one-of-a-kind talent when it comes to poetry and spoken word as well that comes through. Just a passionate person that has so much to say. And wow, just so underrated. I can't express enough how underrated Kae Tempest is. Like, when you're looking at UK hip-hop and UK music, this run of albums has been one of the best of the past 10-15 years, and it's never talked about. I do not know why, and I had to include it on this list because it blows me away every time. I think for me, maybe the first album is the best one, but honestly, the second one could be the better one too. And even the Book of Traps and Lessons, I think a lot of people would call the best one as well. Like, seriously, there's just such an interesting approach to all three of those albums. The first one being a bit more of a story-based narrative, and then the next two kind of touching on the wider societal issues and life of living in the UK. And good God, does it get absolutely nailed on by Kae on these albums. Yeah, so good. Such an interesting run of albums next, though. This three-peat is incredible from Sophia and Stevens. It might even be maybe rivaling Stevie Wonder here, but the best crop of 3 albums of all of these artists. Because with some of them, and I might mention it as I go on to it, like there might be a slight drop off with one of them, or I'm not quite loving one of them, but the run is still exceptionally good regardless. But with this one, I mean, Illinois is one of my all-time favourite albums for sure. Then you've got Age of Adz, which is just an exceptionally great album from 2010. And then again with Carrie and Lowell, one of the best albums of the 2010s too. Like, this is ridiculously strong. Wow, just incredible how Sufjan managed to come up with such a wide vast of musical styles across 3 albums, and all being incredibly good in their own right. I mean, that in itself is an achievement, really. I mean, Carrie and Lowell being an absolute heartbreaking release, that really takes a toll on you whenever you do listen to it, really. But Age of Adz having a bit more of an ambitious electronic flavour to it, and then Illinois being a bit more of a joyous, upbeat kind of chamber pop release. That also has its sad moments too. But seriously, nothing really can tie these albums together. They're all so different and all brilliant in their own right too. What a run of albums this is. What I love about mentioning Nick Cave in a video like this of a 3-peat run is that you could be talking about any run of albums in his discography and all of them would be the correct answer. And to be fair, picking just 3 is insane. And I think this goes for quite a few artists here. If we're looking at, you know, discographies on the whole, you could expand it to like 4 runs or 5 runs. And I think Nick Cave is absolutely in that conversation as well. I just think the run of music he's had across his career is remarkable with the Bad Seeds for sure. But yeah, I wanted to mention the run from Let Love In, Murder Ballads, and then ending on The Boatman's Call, which for me is my personal favourite Nick Cave album ever, and one of my all-time favourite albums ever, actually. I think The Boatman's Call is an absolute beautiful album. I think it shows a totally different side to what we've seen of Nick Cave, and then of course in his later career we started to see that side of him a lot more when he started touching on the loss of his son in his later albums as well. And again, this most recent run of albums he's been on with the Bad Seeds could easily be in the conversation of a 3-peat run as well. So don't worry if that's your personal pick, but I just wanted to go with this one because again, stylistically, I think some of the post-punk elements that come through and some of the gothic elements that come through on Murder Ballads and Let Love In are just totally different to what you get on The Boatman's Call, and all of the albums here are at least great. Like, there isn't really a drop in quality at all, and I think this run of albums is exceptionally worthwhile and one of the best runs really in music history. And I think, again, expanding that out to maybe 5 albums, you might even have one of the best runs in music, period, ever, of all decades, of all genres, from what Nick Cave was doing in the 90s. It's ridiculously strong. But I'm going for this one. I personally think this is one of his best periods in his artistry. The Bad Seeds are fantastic, and I wanted to highlight how good the 90s run was. Going again with a bit of an underrated run here, but Uyama Hiroto with his 3 albums, and his only 3 albums actually. I don't think he's dropped anything else since Freeform Jazz in 2016, but I want to mention it because I think this is an incredible run of music and seriously strong, especially those first 2 albums. It appears, according to Rate Your Music, that his most recognisable album is in fact the 3rd one. I would say the quality of that one drops a little bit, but even still, that is a really good album, and I think the first 2 particularly are just stunners. Like, if you are a fan of Nujabes or anything in the instrumental hip-hop realm, and you have never listened to Uyama Hiroto, you are not doing yourself any favours by ignoring him as an artist, because this is peak music when it comes to instrumental hip-hop and new jazz. The beautiful sounds that come through on these albums are just to die for, and I think Uyama absolutely deserves more respect, and that is why I want to include it in this video, because I think that run is totally in the conversation whenever I think of 3-peat runs. Going a little bit off the path here by mentioning a run of mixtapes. Now, I think you could mention a lot of rappers when it comes to these kinds of three-peat runs, but for me, I wanted to mention Young Thug. I really wanted to mention Young Thug in this video, man. I was so happy looking through his catalogue and realising how strong the run was from Slime Season 3 through to Jeffrey, and then the Beautiful Thugger Girls album, which personally for me is actually my favourite out of the 3 mixtapes from Thugger. I've always found that album super underrated, to be honest with you. I find his approach to the tracks on that album so creative and so ridiculously stupid, but also really fun. Yeah, I love that album, man. And of course, I think Jeffrey being the fan favourite here of his catalogue, but still, what an album that is. I mean, some of his most eccentric and vibrant performances ever on that album, and vibrant beats and instrumentals. It's just so colourful. The album cover is iconic as well. The fact that he actually even did that is ridiculous, to be fair. And then, of course, Slime Season 3, which is just so short and straight to the point, and probably the most fun out of these 3. I think that album, or the mixtape, is really fun. Just again, wacky and eccentric in the right places. The beats are so good. Yeah, Young Thug in this conversation makes sense to me. I think in terms of album runs, I don't think he's had quite a run of 3 albums yet. I mean, technically, he's barely even put any albums out, actually. It's all been mixtapes in his discography, but I think his most recent album was pretty poor. Punk, wasn't really keen on that one. But when we're looking at his mixtapes, God, this is definitely one of the best mixtape runs of any rapper's career for sure. Want to mention Masakatsu Takagi next. I think this is another artist that you may be unfamiliar with looking at this list of behemoth artists and massive names for sure. I think the 2000s all the way through to the 2012 soundtrack album is the run I want to look at. Actually though, his best album in my opinion comes later on and doesn't quite fall into this run, but I wanted to mention this particular run because, similar to what the ones I've said before, it's actually remarkable how strong the run of albums this is. I mean, Koida, one of his most, I guess, sparse and delicate releases ever. The beauty behind the tracks on Private Public, I am in awe of. The piano playing and the vocals that come through on some of those tracks are just to die for. And then, of course, the Wolf Children soundtrack is an absolute stunner. And I wouldn't usually include a soundtrack album in a run of albums like this, really. But you've got to mention it because that is so bloody good. I've never even seen the film, but the soundtrack itself is just one that blows me away. And when I was kind of digging more into Masakatsu's discography, I got really obsessive with listening to everything he'd put out because I was just like, wow, I need to hear this, I need to hear that, I need to hear that. And I was so glad to stumble upon the works that he's put out because, good God, the run of music here is sensational. And we're going to end with the final pick here. I should have given you 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Joni Mitchell. You probably aren't too surprised to hear me mention Joni, although maybe you are. I guess when I first started this channel, I did do a video on Joni, but that was years ago. Maybe I don't talk about Joni enough on this channel, actually, for people to realise how much I love her as an artist. But again, this right here is another artist that you could go this run, extend it to 5 albums in a row, 6 albums maybe. It's another conversation you're having here, like a Nick Cave or a Stevie Wonder, where the run of exceptionally good albums just kept on going and going and going. But we're talking about a three-peat here, and I personally wanted to start with Ladies of the Canyon. Then you've got in the centre her absolute magnum opus, Blue, and then after that you've got For the Roses. But if you take it beyond that, you could include Court and Spark, and if you go before that, you could include Clouds. Like, wow, what a run of music that this lady gave us over the years. But yeah, Ladies of the Canyon is a stunner. Blue is just an all-timer, really. The influence that album's had too. I mean, looking at an artist like Taylor Swift, who's huge now, she's talked about how much she loves Blue in interviews before. So yeah, just incredible, really. And then, yeah, For the Roses, which I think is probably the weakest out of the three, but still really good stuff. Approach to music, her vocals as well. Oh, just everything about her is special, man. Joni is special. And I'm glad I was able to end this video on such a special artist too. Because, yeah, what a run of albums this one is too. And we're going to leave it there. 10 album runs, 10 three-peats in music history that I think are absolutely legendary and are absolutely fantastic and blow me away with how good the consistency is from the artists in question. Of course, this could keep going. I could throw out so many albums here, and maybe I'll do another one in the future as well, because I think the amount of albums and amount of artists out there that have kept the consistency incredibly strong for their careers, modern, old, whatever you want to look at, whatever genre, there's so many out there that have done this. And yeah, for me, I just wanted to mention these ones today in this video. I was excited to bring these ones up. Please tell me your thoughts in the comments about the ones I've mentioned, and then tell me ones I should have included and what you would include as well in your own list, because like I say, this could go on forever and ever and ever. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, something a bit different on the channel, and I'm glad you stuck around to the end and watched it. Please have a good day, subscribe if you haven't already, and goodbye.